What if I told you that in the second week of Bahrain it was not McLaren, nor Red Bull, but Lewis Hamilton who completely changed Ferrari's internal course? Because while everyone was looking at the timetable, something much deeper was happening inside the red box. Hamilton didn't just roll. He didn't just test SF26. It revealed data that neither Charles Leclerc nor Frédéric Vasseur had finished interpreting. Data that speaks of a car with championship potential, but also of such extreme fragility that it could destroy an entire season if it is not understood to the millimeter. In silence, without explosive headlines, Hamilton put something on the table that shook Ferrari's technical structure. The SF26 has a very high ceiling in race pace and energy management, but it lives in a dangerously narrow thermal window. And when a 7-time world champion tells you that after analyzing long runs in Bahrain, it is not an opinion, it's a warning. The question is clear. Is Ferrari prepared to build its project around Hamilton's technical reading, even if that means changing the direction it already had with Leclerc? Until that moment, the internal reading of the SF26 was greatly influenced by Ferrari's traditional reference in recent years, Charles Leclerc. His approach has always been clear, aggressive in qualifying, seeking the front limit, demanding immediate response on the front axle. And in the first few days, the car seemed to respond reasonably well to that pattern. There was speed at one turn. There was potential, but a structural understanding of the behavior in long runs under the new energy context was lacking. This is where Hamilton alters the scene. After completing his stints on high fuel, Lewis did not focus on outright time. It focused on lap-to-lap degradation, the thermal stability of the rear axle, and, above all, energy management under sustained load. What it began to show the engineers was not simply that the car was fast, but that the SF26 had a surprisingly strong average pace when power was deployed with a logic other than conventional. In other words, Ferrari was underestimating its own racing potential. And this is crucial, because Bahrain is not just any circuit. It is a track that brutally punishes the rear axle, which exposes any weakness in traction and which makes thermal management a decisive factor. If a car survives there on long runs with contained degradation, it is no coincidence. It is architecture. Hamilton detected that the car suffered practically no clipping at the end of the straight in his simulations, even without using the most aggressive map. That means the energy delivery curve is better optimized than it seemed. In the new regulatory framework, where electrical efficiency is decisive and the absence of the MGUH completely changes the dynamics of recovery and deployment, this detail is pure gold. And when he shared that reading, the atmosphere inside the box changed. Frédéric Vasseur immediately understood the magnitude of what they were seeing. They were not looking at a simply competitive car. They were faced with a concept that could be dominant if exploited correctly. But the same analysis revealed the other side of the coin. The operating window is extremely narrow. Small variations in runway temperature or crosswind altered the balance more than expected. The car went from stable to jittery with minimal changes. This extreme sensitivity is what turns a large car into a dangerous tool if it is not operated with absolute precision. For Leclerc, the impact was quieter but just as profound. Because while he was evaluating the car from immediate sensations, Hamilton was interpreting energy patterns and medium-term correlations. It wasn't about who was faster that day. It was about who was best understanding the technical DNA of the 2026 project. And when Lewis stated that he felt that part of his DNA was in this car, he was not speaking from emotion, but from the technical coherence between his driving style and the architecture of the hybrid system. Because if the SF26 really has that very high ceiling that the data shows, the question stops being whether Ferrari is fast. The question becomes whether Ferrari is structurally prepared to operate such a demanding car for a full season without making operational errors. Because it's one thing to discover that you have a car with a very high roof, and quite another to assume what it means to operate it for 24 weekends with no margin for error. The second week in Bahrain made it clear that the SF26 is not simply fast, it is extremely sensitive. And when Hamilton finished presenting his technical conclusions to the group of engineers, the conversation within Ferrari stopped revolving around how to be faster, and began to focus on how not to lose control of the concept. This is where the real conflict comes in. Hamilton not only praised the race pace and energy management, he also warned that the temperature window is dangerously narrow. In Bahrain, with relatively stable conditions, the car responded accurately when kept within that ideal thermal range. But small variations in crosswind or track surface altered torque delivery and rear balance much more pronounced than expected. This means that the SF26 does not tolerate deviations, does not forgive intermediate configurations. It works at an exact point. And that is where Vasseur begins to see the problem in the medium term. Because if the car depends so much on specific conditions, each circuit on the calendar becomes a different challenge. Bahrain offered a clear reference, but what will happen on routes with fast corners with continuous support? What will happen on tracks where the ambient temperature fluctuates 10 degrees between qualifying and the race? What will happen when the wind changes direction in the middle of a long stint? What Hamilton detected is not just the structural strength and energy management. It also detected operational fragility. Internally, this creates a strategic bifurcation. Ferrari can choose two paths. The first, protect the concept, expand the operating window even if that means losing some maximum performance. The second, squeeze the absolute potential that Hamilton has identified, accepting that each weekend will be an exercise in surgical precision. And that decision is not minor, because it defines the development philosophy throughout the season. For Leclerc, this is the most delicate point, because if the team decides to stabilize the car around Hamilton's energy reading, the overall balance may begin to lean towards a more progressive style in power delivery, more linear, more controlled on corner exit. That fits perfectly with the technical approach Lewis described after testing. But it could also force Charles to adapt his way of attacking corner entry and his aggressiveness in qualifying. We are not talking about favoritism. We are talking about technical direction. In addition, there is a detail that aggravates the tension. The new 2026 regulatory framework makes energy efficiency the competitive core of the project. If Ferrari has already solved part of that puzzle, changing the architecture now to make the car more forgiving could mean moving back in the area where they seem to be a step ahead. And that puts Vasseur before an uncomfortable decision. Do you prioritize immediate stability or long-term structural potential? The pressure increases because it is no longer just about surprising in a test. Now Ferrari knows it has something special on its hands. And when you know you can be a champion, the psychological margin is reduced. Each mistake weighs twice as much. Every thermal deviation matters. Every setup decision becomes a possible turning point. If Ferrari decides to squeeze the full potential of the SF26, every race will be a surgical operation. Every variation in temperature, every change in wind, every tire pressure decision can alter the behavior of the car in an amplified way. This requires operational discipline that has historically been the Scuderia's weak point in critical moments. But if they choose to water down the concept to extend the operating window, they may lose precisely what makes this car special: its energy efficiency and average long-run pace. And in the new regulatory context, where electrical management will make a difference every weekend, giving ground there could be an irreparable strategic error. Is Ferrari going to become a team that builds around the reading of a 7-time world champion who understands regulatory transitions better than anyone? Or will it try to maintain a political and technical balance that dilutes that potential in the name of internal stability? Because what happened in the second week of Bahrain was not simply Hamilton surprising Vasseur and Leclerc with new data. It was that it redefined the starting point of the project. It showed them that the SF26 doesn't need more raw power. You need precision, consistency, and strategic courage. And here is the closing of this story. Championships are not won just by having the fastest car. They are won when a team understands exactly what kind of car it has, and dares to commit to that identity without half measures. Ferrari now knows it. Hamilton has already seen it. Lewis Hamilton did not surprise by being the fastest. He was surprised because he saw something that not everyone was looking at. He detected that the SF26 is not an ordinary car. It is a car with championship potential based on its energy efficiency and average race pace, but also based on an extremely delicate base. It works like a scalpel, precise, lethal, and dangerous if not handled with absolute precision. Frédéric Vasseur realized that the challenge is no longer catching up with rivals. It is not wasting a concept that can mark the 2026 era. And Charles Leclerc understood that he shares a project with a driver whose technical reading can redefine the internal direction of the team. It's not a fight of egos. It is a redefinition of priorities. The great truth that Bahrain leaves is this: Ferrari does not need to discover speed. He already has it. What you need is operational coherence, strategic stability, and the courage to commit to the path that Hamilton has revealed. Because if they try to soften the concept for fear of its fragility, they could lose the structural advantage they have today. But if they squeeze it without discipline, that narrow window can turn against them when conditions change. Let me know in the comments what you think about all this.